For more than a century, Basotho men crossed Lesotho's borders into South Africa, drawn by a promise of work in their gold mines. They dug deep underground, breathing silica dust, swallowing darkness, and trading their lungs for a wage that barely kept their families alive back home. For the gold mining companies, they traded their lungs to build multinational companies, a wealth that continues to grow for generations. These gold mine workers today bear nothing but scars on their bodies and silence from the very companies they sacrificed their lives for. This is the price of gold. This is the struggle of Lesotho's forgotten migrant mine workers. To understand the injustice of today, we must first confront how multinational corporations build their fortunes on the cheap labor of migrants from Lesotho. In a time they seek compensation for their lung impairments, but only a few see the compensation.
We should not even say that they benefited from the labor. We should say they benefited from cheap labor from the neighboring countries. That was the key, because that's what made them to make huge profits, because those companies have become multi-billion companies all over the world. Gold was commanding a huge domination in the markets because of those men.
But while the mining companies amassed wealth, the gold mine workers, the men and women who dug the gold, were left with a legacy. No, not a legacy, but a curse of untreatable disease, silicosis. Silicosis that slowly erodes their lungs and has them facing countless bouts of tuberculosis as the silicosis progresses over time. And when it was time for justice, they found themselves trapped again, this time not underground, but inside a complex paperwork, strict procedures, and endless delays to get compensation.
So looking at the stringent way of TV issues for these poor people to claim, stringent ways just to process the claims, the papers, confusion that they get. They said, okay, well, this one is not a killer disease, not a killer TB. It's just the TB that you acquired from your community. As they say, TB is a community-based disease. And looking at also the physicians who were also dealing with it, we understand that they were arguing that TB should not even be part of something that people can claim for, unfortunately. So those are the things that we are aware of, and it's a way that the profit-making entities, the multinational companies, multi-billion companies are trying to do all the times to get the maximum profits, while they don't care much for the people who have brought those profits, which is very unfortunate. Which we were thinking that we were supposed to be working with the Union of Mines all over to fight for this. But we have delayed the ability to deal with this. It's now that we are trying to get in touch with all these teams and collaborate with the labor unions throughout, so that the people from the golds, platinum, we may speed up their getting, because these people are dying. And then they die without getting what they deserved, what they worked for. They're not asking for anything new.
Out of this injustice endured by mine workers, a majority drawn from Lesotho, came a historic legal battle, a class action lawsuit in South African courts that forced mining giants to settle, even though they called it a no-fault settlement that gave birth to the Tshiamiso Trust.
Ha re fihla mono ke moo jwale dipuisano tsa rona di ileng tsa qetella di tswetse ntho e bitswang tshiamiso. Dinyewe di ne di le pedi. E ne le nyewe ya silicosis e neng e drive-wa ke ntate Richards Paul. Ha ke na bua ka dikateng tsa yena haholo, ba nna ke ne ke le ka ho ena ya TB e re reng e fetole compensable disease. Eo hona jwale ke ra e leng compensable disease hona jwale ke ka lebaka la ka. Jwale ha re se re hlotse nyewe, jwale batho bana ba applies outside court settlement, re dumetse ho ya ho yona, re ile dipuisanong. Dipuisano tse ntsa rona ha di se re di isa ka kgotla hore lekgotla le di fetole qeto ya lekgotla. Yaba jwale di tswala tshiamiso. Tshiamiso ha e se e le teng, jwale e se e sebetsa, e tlameha ho tlola di-borderline jwale e ya dinaheng tseo nyewe e sa buelwang ho tsona.
But the mine workers' victory in South African courts did not immediately translate into justice in Lesotho. When Tshiamiso crossed the border to begin its work, the cracks in the system were impossible to ignore.
Jale e fihlile ya re tsietsa e fihla Lesotho. Tshiamiso e ne e lokela hore ebe ha e fihla mona ho entswe domesticate qeto tse tsa lekgotla. Di hlophela hore na ha di se di le mona mokgwa tsona wa ho sebetsa wa go hloke dikgoqetsane di ofeng. Ha ya etsahala ntho ena domestication.
Tshiamiso Trust was created to right these wrongs, but even its top officials admit that their compensation process is not a perfect fit and it's very tedious to navigate.
As you may know, the Tshiamiso Trust was established to give effect to a landmark class action against the gold mining industry in South Africa. Though these prominent mining companies agreed to pay compensation to qualifying gold mine workers who develop permanent lung impairment due to silicosis and work-related TB. It is important to note that the trust is a product of a settlement agreement between the mine workers and the ex-mine workers and the 6 mining companies.
Yet, even with the trust in place, thousands of ex-miner families remain stuck and in limbo.
And South Africa, in terms of this and looking at all this history of the mine workers, has not been fair to this country, has not treated this country fairly, even ethically, in terms of the landlocked country. We have no other place to go out of this country. But to be treated like this and our people be treated like this, look at Ceres, how the people are being treated throughout. Go to Belcom, Klerksdorp, Newcastle, in Joburg, Tsietsi, in Soweto, the way our people are being treated, the way they are restricted, they are even being abused by ordinary citizens in terms of the medical care. It shows you that the people are in trouble. So you can imagine, most of those people are affected by their fathers, their uncles who were in the mines. If they kept the monies, those who are selling the apples, those who are selling the fruits, those who are selling vegetables, those who are selling the food, then they are able to get that the cash flow within the country. Then the economy becomes alive.
For many ex-miners and their widows, the struggle is not theoretical. It is a lived experience, daily and painfully.
Jale tsona tsa bobedi hape a se ke tlile ke rena x-ray ya pele kae x-ray ya pele ha e hlaile ha o hlaile hore ke ile kae nka ke re a te Tshiamiso e ne le teng mo e ne le efe ya ba ka nnete ke mona mo ba nqalang botjha hape le bona ya ba mbontsha hore x-ray ya ka e hlahisa mona ke sotheile mo tokomane ena ke ya Tshiamiso e bontshang hore ke hlahlobuwe e ile kae jale e sale ema mona mo bonang ba entse letshwao le letala lena hwa thwe e fihlile mo e tshwanetse e theohele mona e fihle ka tlase ke patala ha e sale ha ke ntse ke re ke tlo check-a o ntse o thwe ntse le ma taba tsena tse tokomane tse di hlaha ho thwe ha ka o entse a go hlahisa dipampiri tsa ntse tse o no tshwa TV ho tsona ka ne se ka di hlahisa tsa le mo tsene ke se ke TV ka dikgwedi tseno tse 8 e nngwe ya bobedi TV ne ke enta tse ka di hlahisa taba tse ya ba ka nnete hana mo ba hlahloba taba tsa ka ba ha ka o tsane claim e ke a gale ebile ntho engwe le engwe ya hao e felletse ya TV mo bothata ke eng bana ke ditaba tsa ka je ebe ba re nke ke ema hanyanyana ba letsetse ba letsetsa ba botsa ka re taba claim e mo ho baneng so sebetso fitlhelana ka itse pele ba ga ba botho ke tswe nke emela taba tse.
Patlo's experience mirrors a life story of thousands of gold mine workers. Claims restarted, documents missing, lives placed on hold.
Hate so hlakotswe ntho engwe le engwe lo qala fatshe e le gore taba tsena tse mona di se di hlakotswe empa ho setseng taba tsa ka tsona tsa hore ke le ka ithipota tsona ntse di le teng tsena tse seng tsidiyeng tse di hlakotswe ke qadile fatshe ka jeno lena ke isiwe motjhining ona o hemang ke isiwe x-ray mme boemo bo seng ke le ho bona bana ba ka hantle ne tshwaetse se ke le sepetlele ke hanetse bana ba ka re ke utlwile hore re tlo iswa re tlo betse re lo re ya tshiamiso mme ke se ke tswa ka mono ba elelletswe le bona boemo ba ka le ba ntse ba nyolosa ba theosa le nna ba bona hore ke ya maka thata ba ntshi.
But the Tshiamiso Trust insists that its work follows a strict trust deed directive and medical guidelines. It says not every gold mine worker or widow claimant, whether diagnosed to have TB or silicosis, automatically qualifies for compensation.
BMEs are done for living claimants. Now, our data shows that out of all the claims that we receive in lodgements, 48% are for deceased mine workers, are dependent claims, and 52% is for living claimants. That's why you will hear the numbers dropping because of that particular aspect. Those who are deceased, of course, cannot be done BMEs. So it's very much important when you say half of those have been called for BMEs is because the others do not require BMEs because they are dependent claimants. And you can agree with me that you are not going to hear more of claimants who come out to say, I have been compensated for obvious reasons. But you will hear more of those who have not been compensated. Those who are compensated quietly, they live and keep quiet. And that's why you are not going to know what happened to those that have been done BMEs and so on. The certification rules under Odingwa are not necessarily similar to the certification rules under the trust deed. That's why an Odingwa certificate is accepted as an approved Odingwa certificate if it substantially aligns with the criteria for qualifying disease in terms of the trust deed and specifically Schedule H of the trust deed. And let me explain that this is the matter that we are considering because it has also become a trust deed interpretation issue that we are busy resolving at the present moment. I know it has been taking a long time and the wait may have been too long, but it won't be longer than it has been.
Tshiamiso Trust CEO Monyadziwa Kwinda says they deal with documentation that does not clearly reflect the real cause of death of these ex-miners they should compensate, but adds that stakeholder engagements are not and have not been in vain, as they have brought some amendments to the trust deed in an effort to accommodate the realities on the ground.
You will find, for example, respiratory failure as the cause of death. Now, that is not silicosis or TB. And that's why some of these claimants will have to become category B if they fall under that particular category, or some of them not even being compensated. But furthermore, I need also to state that we have had since another further amendment that relates to TB, that is amendment number 8. And this is just to demonstrate that when we have this kind of discussions, we note them and we do take them quite very serious, and to an extent where possible, and I want to say where possible, we look at whether we can amend the trust deed or not. And this one of TB is because we have got people who have suffered from TB. They've got TB records that they're TB while working in the mines. But you find that when they go for assessment, they are certified that they don't have a current qualifying disease. Now, the amendment number 8 says if somebody has no current qualifying disease, but there are previous TB records, then that person can be compensated based on the previous TB records because they've suffered from TB. So that is the amendment number 8 that has come in. So there are lots of things that we are looking at, and I'm just sharing this with you so that you understand that when you raise issues, we may not have answers today. We may not look like we are listening because I cannot or we cannot go and change the trust deed overnight. For now, we are operating under the trust deed. But when people speak, we listen and we go back to the trustees, we go back to the founders and also the claimants agent and say, we are proposing this amendment. That's why now we are sitting at amendment number 9, still looking at amendment number 10 and amendment number 11 coming, which deals with other issues. I can't talk about those ones now because those are issues that are still in the pot. Now, as the trust, we would love to compensate everyone. Unfortunately, that is not what the trust deed prescribes. Hence, while benefit medical examinations are done, there is a medical certification process that also has to be done to determine if somebody has a qualifying disease. And as you know by now, our medical eligibility rate is quite very low. Although in the past we reported less than 30, currently we have seen our medical eligibility rate is sitting at 30%. And what that simply means is that out of the 10 claims that goes through our medical certification panel, only 3 are medically eligible and 7 are medically ineligible. And that is where the unhappiness comes in. And because the trust is working, is doing lots of work, everyone has got hope that they will be compensated. And when they are not compensated, it becomes a disappointment.
When the miners die, their widows and beneficiaries must step into the fight to access the Tshiamiso compensation. Their pain in trying to be compensated reveals the deepest cracks in the process.
Ya ba o santsa a kena beke tse pedi a etswa a dula beke kapo tse pedi ha imona a khutlela sepetlele ho fihlela qetellong ha santsa a kula sa a tswa ya ngodisa ba ne ba Tshiamiso e Gauteng ba ile nne ba nletsetsa ka tsatsi le leng ba ile ba nletsetsa hore ke ba direct hore na ba tla jwang mona lapeng ba ya tla ka nete sale ke ba lebella ha ba ka ba fihla ho fihlela ntate a hlokahala ya re ntate ha sa hlokaetse ya ba re ba tsebisa bona bao ba Tshiamiso hore ntate o sa hlokaetse ya ba re retse postmortem ba re fangaka e tlo etsa postmortem ngaka ena etsa postmortem ne re fuwe ke ba Tshiamiso ka morao ho moo ba ne ba Gauteng ba letseditse hangata ba ntse ba mpotsa rona ntate o kae ntse ke ba jwetsa hore ntate o hlokaetse ha sa ke re ntate o hlokaetse ba ile ba re ke romelle ditokomane tsa ka hobane neng yena ona sa a fane ka tsa hae ya ba re ke romelle ID ya ka ke ba romelletse ID ya ka itse ka morao hore ke romelle ID ya ka eba ke ba kwetse molomo ha ba sa re letho ka morao mono ke la nna ka ya ka teba ka mola ke lo utlwa hore na hona le molaetsa o fihlileng ka nete ba ile nna ba ndikadikisa ho fihlela ba hlokomela hore ntate ha sebedise passport o sebedisa ID ya ba re ho nna ke ya botshabelo ko ntsha monna ka systeming ho tsewa a ntse a phela empa di parts tseo tsa monnaka ntse di le Lesotho mona ha di so tsamaye postmortem re ke pulmonary silicosis ha ke re Tshiamiso e tlile mo e re tlo patala batho ba sefuba ha qeta ke re sefuba se ya ntho ho ya ka di steps tsa hona wena nye ya matshwafo a sa le kotsing ha ka ya ka ena ona sa sena ona matshwafo ke re Tshiamiso ha o fihla ka mono ba re na o so fumane molaetsa o tloang Gauteng o re ntšhelete e teng bo madima ba rona ba hlolohadi ha ona taba le rona ho thwe le hwana no ntse khola koko ka mo ne re tebela ho re tle hae ho batluwa bo ntate ba ntseng ba phela rona ka hayo le ba rona ba se ba ile ha o sana taba ka rona le bana ba banna bana ba rona ba sebeditseng mining ba holofaletseng mining ho fihlela ba ya mobung.
Behind the scenes, the Tshiamiso Trust compensation system dictated by the trust deed is a maze, a puzzle of medical rules, legal documents, death certificates, and cross-border challenges that the dominantly illiterate mine workers must navigate to be compensated for their TB and silicosis.
The fact that somebody has got a diagnosis of either silicosis or TB does not necessarily mean that they will be compensated, because there is an aspect of causation that is looked at from a cardiorespiratory assessment through the lung function test that determines who need to be compensated and at what class that compensation has to be made.
Monyadziwa Kwinda admits the delays in processing claims.
Indeed, there has been a delay in processing dependent claimants, and for reasons such as that, when the trust started, most of them were lodged based on the death certificates that they produced or submitted to the trust. And those are death certificates that state that a mine worker died of natural causes, not necessarily TB or silicosis. So we could not progress those claims further. Instead of saying they are ineligible, we went further as the trust, understanding that an official death certificate cannot be the one that is issued by the authorities, depending on a country. And that one only states natural causes or unnatural causes or undetermined. That's why we had to embark on a process of amending the trust deed. And that process of amending the trust deed was completed last year in December, giving rise to Amendment number 7. Amendment number 7 introduces what we call a certificate of medical finding of cause of death that is prescribed by the World Health Organization. That is what is usually called a death notification form that is completed by the medical practitioner who has certified that patient when they passed away at the hospital. Now, that has unlocked some of the claims for dependent claimants, but there are those that are still cannot be processed. Why? Because still those forms are not available at our health facilities. And as long as they are not available, we cannot continue to process those claims. That's why we still have a challenge of processing dependent claimants. Furthermore, what we have also done now with those that have been done postmortems is that we are looking at the results and the findings of their postmortems to fall into the second category, which is dependent silicosis category B, where now if somebody from the postmortem report has got silicosis, class 2 or class 3, then they can be considered for silicosis, dependent silicosis category B. But we still have those ones that we cannot process, unfortunately, because of the missing documents. Yeah, the basic thing is that we have got an institution called NIOH in South Africa, that is National Institute of Occupational Health. That institute is responsible also for the performance of the autopsy or postmortem, specifically for occupational lung diseases, what we call pneumoconiosis. They work very closely with the MBOD because they operate under ODINWA, not necessarily under the trust, but under ODINWA. So the primary responsibility to ensure that deceased mine workers have got autopsies done or postmortems done lies with the MBOD in terms of ODINWA. But we can also access those postmortem reports to be able to assist those claimants. Currently, where the MBOD may have challenges, even financially in terms of transportation of the organs, they have approached us. I know of cases where they have approached us and we have paid for the courier to transport those organs to the NIOH. So in terms of what could be there, it's a matter that just need to be investigated in terms of what are we talking about when there are organs that have been sitting somewhere for 4 years. And of course, there are challenges of cross-border transfer of organs. It's not like it's easy like you and I crossing the borders, but to cross the borders with organs, and which you need to explain why are you crossing the borders with the organs, and it will require the relationship between the two countries where the organs have to cross the borders. And that is a matter that I believe can be looked at from a government point of view. We did not really turn back many claimants, especially the dependent claimants. Most of them, what has actually happened is that they were lodged, but their claims were not processed. It was only towards beginning of last year that we said, let us not quickly take these claimants without a death certificate that indicates either silicosis or TB, because we are not going to process them further. And the message that one can send is that those that have got a certificate of cause of death, medical certificate of cause of death, can approach our trust lodgement sites with TEBA. And also now during our outreach here in Lesotho is the best opportunity to come through with whatever documents that they have and see if we cannot be able to assist them from that context.
Even though the trust introduced new amendments allowing previous TB records to count and accepting the use of World Health Organization guidelines for medical cause of death, there are still gaps.
We are here to provide a standard package which is leading every one of the claimants to the Medical Bureau of Occupational Diseases, which is an arm of occupational diseases within the Department of Health in South Africa. It is standard for everyone. So Tshiamiso already came, the founders already on the ground, providing these services for the beneficiaries. Thus, it's just a portion within this bigger picture that the MBOD is entrusted with, because they are focusing on those few minds which were involved in the Class Act. So, to my experience to date, when they came to Lesotho to process these claims, they have been working independently of us. Yes, they've been functioning independently of us. However, I'm very much aware that they are using the same panel that the MBOD is also using to compensate. So much that in the system of the Commissioner of Compensation in South Africa, we can see who has been compensated under the system of MBOD or under the system of Tshiamiso. But there is no real interconnectedness in the processes. I have not heard whereby there is that, although it's supposed to be like that, that whatever information is available within this system of compensation, that it can be used across both sides. I think Tshiamiso can use the communication, that they can also access this same information and process the payments. But although I may not be able to be spot on in terms of the challenge, but I understand that there is a challenge of this information just going through these two entities